It was a sunny afternoon in Los Angeles, the kind of day that made everything feel slower, brighter, and lighter. Barron Trump, now a tall, confident teenager, decided to spend the day enjoying some time to himself. After a quiet morning of reading, he felt like treating himself to lunch at one of his favorite spots, LA Terrace, a well-known high-end restaurant. The restaurant was famous for its blend of luxury and calm, a place where celebrities, business leaders, and influencers gathered to enjoy good food and privacy. Barron had been to LA Terrace before. He liked its peaceful vibe and the excellent service. Dressed casually but neatly, he walked through the restaurant's glass doors. People noticed him immediately, but not just because of his height or presence. What drew attention was the bright red MAGA hat he wore on his head. It was bold, standing out against the neutral tones of the elegant restaurant. He didn't wear it to make a statement. It was simply part of who he was, something he felt comfortable with. The hostess greeted him with a polite smile, her demeanor polished and professional. She led him to a quiet corner table near the windows where sunlight streamed in softly. Barron settled in, took out his earbuds, and opened the menu, scanning it for his favorite dish. The restaurant wasn't crowded, just a few tables were occupied. A couple sipped wine in hushed conversation, while another diner casually glanced at his phone. Everything seemed calm and normal at first. But then, Barron began to notice the quiet attention. A man at a nearby table leaned in to whisper something to his partner. Over by the bar, two waiters exchanged glances and spoke in low voices. He didn't pay much attention to it, his focus still on the menu. However, things changed quickly when the restaurant manager appeared. The manager was a man in his mid-40s, wearing a sharp suit that matched his commanding tone. His expression was serious as he walked briskly to Barron's table. His voice, loud enough to carry across the room, interrupted the calm atmosphere. "Excuse me," he said firmly. "We have a policy against political apparel here. I'm going to have to ask you to remove the hat." Barron looked up from the menu, surprised but not rattled. He paused and removed his earbuds, setting them down on the table. "I wasn't aware of any policy like that," he replied calmly, his voice steady and polite. The manager gestured vaguely toward the entrance. "It's part of our code of conduct," he explained. "We want this to be a neutral space for all guests." Barron tilted his head slightly, taking in the situation. He glanced around the room, noticing how some diners tried to avoid eye contact while others openly watched the exchange. He wasn't one to create drama. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," he said, his tone respectful. "I just came here to have lunch." The manager's expression tightened. "You need to take the hat off," he insisted, his voice firm, "or I'll have to ask you to leave." Barron hesitated for a moment, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded slightly and stood up, his decision clear. "If that's how you feel," he said evenly, "then I'll leave." The restaurant fell into an uncomfortable silence as Barron picked up his belongings. He left his glass of water untouched on the table and walked to the door, his movements steady and composed. Without another word, he stepped outside, letting the door close softly behind him. Inside, the tension remained, hanging thick in the air as everyone processed what had just happened. Outside, Barron paused briefly in the sunlight, adjusting his hat and taking a deep breath. Outside the restaurant, Barron took a moment to collect his thoughts. The warm California breeze brushed against his face as he adjusted his red MAGA hat slightly. He wasn't angry, but a quiet disappointment settled over him. He had always believed in treating others with respect, even in disagreements, and what had happened inside felt like a betrayal of that principle. He wondered if he had done something wrong or if the situation could have been handled differently. A few blocks away, Barron found a small public park with empty benches scattered under the shade of large trees. He chose a quiet spot, sat down, and pulled out his phone. He sent a quick message to his mother, explaining what had just happened. Then he texted a few close friends, not for sympathy, but to get their perspective. He needed to understand if the manager's actions were justified, or if he was simply overthinking the situation. Replies came in quickly. One friend responded, "That's insane. They shouldn't have treated you like that." Another wrote, "Honestly, you handled it better than I would have. I wouldn't have stayed so calm." The messages gave Barron a sense of reassurance, but they didn't completely ease his frustration. He scrolled through the responses again, and as he did, an idea began forming in his mind. Barron wasn't interested in creating drama or escalating the situation. Revenge didn't cross his mind. Instead, he felt this could be an opportunity to do something meaningful. The incident was more than just about a hat or restaurant policy. It reflected a deeper issue of division, judgment, and the need for understanding. He wanted to respond in a way that would make a positive impact, something constructive that could bridge the gap he felt growing between people. With that thought, Barron made a decision. He opened his contact list and began making calls. His voice was calm, but filled with purpose. "Hey," he said into the phone, "I need your help with something." Over the next hour, he had several conversations with friends and people he trusted, sharing his idea and asking for their support. Slowly but surely, a plan started taking shape. Meanwhile, back at LA Terrace, the tension lingered. Word of the incident had already started spreading on social media. Someone had taken a blurry photo of Barron leaving the restaurant, his red hat visible as he walked through the door. The caption read, "They kicked Barron Trump out because of his hat." Really? Comments began pouring in, with some users defending the restaurant's right to enforce its policies, while others called the decision unfair. The restaurant manager stood behind the bar, scrolling through his phone. At first, he told himself not to worry, thinking the situation would blow over quickly. But as more comments appeared, his confidence began to waver. One post read, "So much for a neutral space. Kicking someone out isn't neutral, it's taking a side." Another user added, "This could have been handled better. Respect goes both ways." The manager tried to shake off the growing knot in his stomach, muttering to himself, "Let them talk. I did what I thought was right." But deep down, he felt a creeping sense of doubt. At the same time, Barron sat at his desk at home, scribbling notes in a small notebook. He wasn't focused on the social media storm or the comments being made about the incident. Instead, his attention was on his plan. He wanted to take the negative energy of the situation and turn it into something positive. An idea clicked: a public fundraiser. But not just any fundraiser, it would have a clear message of unity and understanding. Barron imagined creating a space where people from all walks of life could come together, share stories, and build connections. He envisioned food trucks, music, and charity booths. The location, right outside LA Terrace. The idea felt bold, but it also felt right. He wanted the location to symbolize that even in places of conflict, unity could be found. Picking up his phone, he made another call. "Hi, this is Barron Trump. I'm organizing a charity event and I'd love your advice. Can we meet tomorrow?" The person on the other end agreed, and the pieces of his plan began to fall into place. While Barron worked late into the night, sketching out details and reaching out to people for support, LA Terrace remained quiet. The usual buzz of customers had been replaced with cancelled reservations and awkward silences. The manager, who had been confident in his decision earlier, now found himself questioning it. He told himself the backlash would fade, but deep down, he wasn't so sure. As the night wore on, Barron finalized his plans, determined to make something good come out of the day's events. For him, the goal wasn't just to prove a point, it was to inspire change, to show that even moments of conflict could lead to connection and growth. The next morning, The street outside LA Terrace looked completely different. Trucks pulled up, unloading tables, chairs, and decorations as volunteers busily set up an event. The sidewalk began transforming into a lively, welcoming space filled with energy and purpose. Barron stood at the center of it all, directing volunteers and making sure every detail was coming together. His idea had quickly turned into reality, and the vision was clear: a public event that celebrated unity, understanding, and connection. A large banner hung above the makeshift stage, its bold message reading, "United we stand, building bridges, not walls." Around it, booths were being set up for local charities focused on youth mentorship and community building. Food trucks lined the street, offering free meals to anyone who came, and a small live band prepared to play upbeat music to keep the atmosphere light and welcoming. At first, only a few curious onlookers stopped by, unsure of what was happening. But as the setup continued, more and more people began to gather. Families with children, young professionals, and even local influencers arrived, drawn by the buzz around the event. Some had heard about the incident at LA Terrace and wanted to see how Barron was responding. Others were simply intrigued by the message of the event, which stood out in a world that often felt divided. Barron moved through the growing crowd, greeting people with a smile. He shook hands, thanked them for coming, and listened to their stories. Despite the previous day's tension, he remained calm, focused, and kind. His ability to stay grounded and approachable made a strong impression on those who attended. By midday, the event was in full swing. Children laughed as they painted murals at a nearby art booth. The music from the stage created an upbeat, celebratory vibe, and volunteers moved through the crowd, handing out information about local programs. People who might never have crossed paths before were suddenly connecting, chatting, and even laughing together. Barron took the stage, holding a microphone as the crowd turned their attention to him. His voice, steady and confident, carried through the street. "Yesterday I was asked to leave a restaurant because of a hat I was wearing," he began. "I understand their policy, even if I don't agree with it. But what struck me wasn't just being asked to leave, it was the bigger picture. We've become so quick to judge each other, to take sides, to shut down conversations. That's not who we are. We can do better." The crowd listened intently, some nodding in agreement. Barron continued, "This event isn't about me, and it's not about them. It's about all of us. It's about finding ways to listen to each other, to understand, and to come together. The money we raise today will go toward programs that foster dialogue and inclusion. Thank you for being here and proving that unity is stronger than division." The crowd broke into applause, and Barron stepped down from the stage, returning to the event to personally thank attendees. His words had struck a chord with many, and people walked away feeling inspired by his thoughtful and mature approach. Meanwhile, inside LA Terrace, the mood was completely different. The restaurant, usually buzzing with activity, felt quiet and uneasy. Only a few tables were occupied, and the customers seemed distracted. Many of them glanced outside, where the energy of the event made the quiet dining room feel even more lifeless. The manager stood near the bar, watching the event through the large windows. He couldn't ignore the lively scene outside, music, laughter, and the growing crowd, but he was hesitant to admit how much it affected him. Social media posts about the event were flooding in, with hashtags like #BuildingBridges and #UnitedWeStand trending locally. People praised Barron for turning a negative moment into something positive, calling him a leader and an inspiration. A waiter approached the manager cautiously. "Some of the customers are saying we should join the event," the waiter said quietly. "It looks incredible." The manager didn't respond immediately. He glanced outside again, his expression conflicted. "This isn't my fight," he muttered, trying to dismiss the idea. Maybe not, the waiter replied, but it's definitely your chance. The words stuck with the manager. He returned to his office, closing the door behind him. Sitting at his desk, he stared at his computer screen. Dozens of emails had come in, ranging from support to sharp criticism. One email from a regular customer stood out. It read, "I've always loved LA Terrace, but what happened yesterday was disappointing. Kicking someone out for their personal beliefs isn't neutrality, it's divisive. I hope you'll find a way to make this right." The words hit harder than he expected. The manager leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He wondered if he had made a mistake. Had his decision truly been about neutrality? Or had he let fear and judgment guide his actions? Outside, the fundraiser was reaching its peak. The band played lively jazz, families explored the booths, and donation boxes filled with contributions. Barron moved through the crowd, his calm energy inspiring everyone around him. It wasn't about proving a point or seeking attention. He genuinely wanted to bring people together. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the street, something unexpected happened. The door of LA Terrace opened and the manager stepped outside. He hesitated for a moment, adjusting his tie nervously before walking toward Barron. The crowd noticed immediately, and a hush fell as they watched the two approach each other. Barron saw him coming and greeted him with a small, polite smile. When the manager extended his hand, Barron shook it firmly. "I'd like to talk," the manager said quietly. The crowd grew silent as Barron and the manager moved to a quieter spot at the edge of the event. The manager, usually confident and composed, looked uneasy. His gaze shifted from the bustling crowd back to Barron, and for a moment he hesitated. Finally, he took a deep breath and spoke, his voice low and sincere. "I need to start by saying that I didn't handle yesterday well," the manager admitted. "I thought I was doing what was best for the restaurant and our guests, but looking back, I can see that I made a mistake. I acted out of fear, not fairness." Barron listened closely, his calm expression encouraging the manager to continue. "It takes courage to admit that," Barron said after a pause. "Thank you for saying it." The manager exhaled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. He motioned toward the event behind them, the vibrant energy of the crowd hard to ignore. "Watching what you've done here today, it's humbling," he said. "You could have turned this into a fight or a public attack on my business, but instead, you created something positive. That's not something many people would have done." Barron smiled faintly, his tone thoughtful as he replied, "I don't think the world needs more anger or division. What happened yesterday could have been just another argument, another headline. But I wanted to show that even difficult situations can lead to something good." The manager nodded slowly, absorbing Barron's words. "You've shown me a better way," he said. "I'd like to support what you're doing here. If there's any way for me or the restaurant to contribute, I'd be happy to help." Barron considered the offer for a moment. "I think the best way to contribute is by reflecting on how we treat one another," he said. "Policies are important, but they shouldn't come at the expense of kindness or understanding. Maybe LA Terrace could host an event like this one, something that brings people together instead of pushing them apart." The suggestion caught the manager off guard. His expression softened, and after a moment of thought, a small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "I think that's a great idea," he said. "Let's make it happen." They shook hands again, this time with genuine warmth. The crowd, sensing the resolution, began to clap. The applause started softly but grew louder, filling the air with a heartfelt energy. It wasn't forced or polite. It was real, a shared recognition of a moment that had bridged a divide. As the fundraiser began to wind down, Barron took the stage for one final speech. The crowd quieted as he spoke, his voice carrying the same calm confidence that had inspired so many throughout the day. "We all make mistakes," Barron began, his tone thoughtful and sincere. "What matters is how we choose to grow from them." Today wasn't just about raising money or responding to what happened. It was about showing that even when we disagree, we can find common ground. Thank you for being here and proving that unity isn't just possible, it's necessary. The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices echoing down the street. Barron stepped off the stage and returned to the crowd, greeting people, thanking volunteers, and sharing quiet moments with attendees who had been moved by the day. The event had transformed the street outside LA Terrace into a place of connection and hope. Families left with smiles, carrying with them not just memories of a lively afternoon, but also a renewed sense of possibility. For many, the message of the event lingered. Even moments of conflict can lead to growth and understanding. Inside the restaurant, the manager stood by the window, watching the last of the attendees leave. His staff, many of whom had joined the fundraiser during their breaks, returned with stories of how meaningful the event had been. For the first time in years, the manager felt something shift within himself. An awareness that perhaps neutrality wasn't about staying silent, but about fostering understanding. In the days and weeks that followed, Barron and the manager began working together to plan a similar event at LA Terrace. It would be a chance for the restaurant to create a space where people from different backgrounds could come together, share their stories, and find common ground. What had started as a tense disagreement became a story of redemption and connection. Through his actions, Barron showed that kindness and understanding could bridge divides, turning even the most difficult moments into opportunities for growth. The red hat that had sparked it all became more than just a symbol of division. It became a reminder of the power of grace, empathy, and the courage to build bridges instead of walls.